The quaint, picturesque city of Mooretown was an unlikely destination for a tech enthusiast like me, James Carter. I had moved here recently, lured by a promising job opportunity in a booming tech startup. The town, with its cobbled streets and Victorian-era architecture, seemed like a step back in time. It was a stark contrast to my world of sleek gadgets and cutting-edge technology. As an avid collector of antiques, I was fascinated by Mooretown's reputation for its numerous antique shops, boasting treasures from bygone eras. It was an odd hobby for someone so immersed in the digital age, but there was something captivating about objects that had withstood the test of time. My fascination, however, took a peculiar turn when I stumbled upon an old legend that seemed to blur the lines between reality and myth: the legend of the Clockwork Child. I first heard it whispered among the locals, a tale often dismissed as a mere fable, the creation of a grief-stricken clockmaker who lost his child in a tragic accident. He had, so the story went, built a mechanical child, a simulacrum of his lost son, with porcelain skin and joints like that of a marionette. Its eyes were the most striking feature. They were crafted from old watch faces, with hands that moved ceaselessly. What truly piqued my interest was not just the tale itself, but the reactions it evoked. Some spoke of it with a nostalgic melancholy, others with a shiver of fear. It was during one of my routine visits to an antique shop, nestled in the heart of Mooretown, that the story began to take an eerie turn into my reality. The shop, a veritable trove of the past, was cluttered with objects, each carrying their own silent histories. Amidst the array of relics, a particular piece caught my eye: an ancient clock, its intricate design and craftsmanship speaking of a time long gone. As I examined it, the shop owner, an elderly man with a weathered face and knowing eyes, approached me. "You've got a good eye," he said, his voice tinged with a hint of unease. "But I must warn you, that clock is said to be linked to the Clockwork Child." His words were like an invitation to a mystery I couldn't resist. That night, I found myself ensnared in a dream so vivid it felt real. I was in the same antique shop, but it was different, warped, stretched in impossible ways. The ticking of clocks filled the air, growing louder until it was all I could hear. And there, amidst the sea of time, stood the Clockwork Child, its watchful eyes fixed on me. Time seemed to loop in on itself, scenes repeating with minor variations, until I awoke with a start. The dream left me with an unsettling feeling, a mix of curiosity and dread. I couldn't shake off the sense that there was more to the legend than just an old wives' tale. And so, with a mix of excitement and apprehension, I began to delve deeper into the mystery of the Clockwork Child. Little did I know, this path would lead me into the shadows of time, from which there was no easy return. My days in Mooretown started to take on a peculiar rhythm, oscillating between my work in the digital realm and my evenings spent unraveling the mysteries of the past. The more I learned about the Clockwork Child, the more engrossed I became. It was as if the town itself, with its cobblestone alleys and whispering winds, was urging me to delve deeper. I returned to the antique shop, drawn by an inexplicable pull towards the ancient clock that seemed to be at the heart of this enigma. The shop owner, Mr. Harold, regarded me with a mix of concern and resignation when I inquired further about the clock and the legend. The clock was crafted by Jonathan Mooretown, the very founder of our town, Mr. Harold revealed, his voice dropping to a hush. His words sent a shiver down my spine. That night, the dream returned, more vivid than before. The Clockwork Child was there again, its eyes tracking my every move. The ticking was incessant, a relentless march of time that felt both comforting and maddening. In the days that followed, my reality began to warp subtly. Time seemed to bend around me. Clocks would stop, then suddenly race ahead. My tech gadgets would malfunction inexplicably whenever I delved into the history of the Clockwork Child. Shadows in my peripheral vision seemed to twitch and move. And in the mirrors of my house, I caught fleeting glimpses of a Victorian-era child with mechanical joints and watch face eyes. Fueled by a mix of fear and fascination, I sought out Mrs. Elwood, an elderly historian who had spent her life studying the town's lore. In her dimly lit study, surrounded by dusty tomes and fading photographs, she shared more about Jonathan Mooretown's descent into madness after the creation of the Clockwork Child. He believed he could trap his son's soul in the clockwork, keep him alive beyond the constraints of time, Mrs. Elwood said, her eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. But what he created was neither his son nor a mere machine. As I left Mrs. Elwood's house, the sense of being watched, of being followed by something not entirely of this world, grew stronger. I could feel the eyes of the Clockwork Child upon me, its presence an ever-growing shadow at the edge of my consciousness. The line between reality and legend was blurring, and I knew I had to find answers before it was too late. My obsession with the Clockwork Child was no longer just about curiosity, it was about survival. The more I immersed myself in the lore of the Clockwork Child, the more my world seemed to unravel. Days blended into each other, punctuated only by the relentless ticking that had begun to echo in my mind. It was as if time itself was becoming a malleable entity, reshaping itself around me, guided by the unseen hands of the Clockwork Child. I started documenting my experiences, hoping to find a pattern or clue in the chaos. The child appeared more frequently now, always at the periphery of my vision, a fleeting wisp of Victorian elegance and mechanical horror. Each encounter left me more disoriented, the ticking of its eyes echoing long after it vanished. The temporal distortions grew more pronounced. I would find myself in time loops, reliving moments repeatedly. The conversation with the neighbor, a walk through the town square, even mundane tasks at work each would loop back on itself, a déjà vu that seemed to stretch into eternity. And always, at the edge of these loops, was the Clockwork Child, its gaze fixed upon me. I realized that my use of modern technology exacerbated these distortions. My smartphone would freeze time, trapping me in moments like a fly in amber. My computer would glitch, causing hours to slip away in what felt like minutes. It was as if the child was reacting to these devices, its presence an antithesis to the modern world. In my quest for answers, I grew distant from my colleagues and friends. They couldn't understand the surreal nightmare my life was becoming. Even I began to question my sanity. Was I simply losing my grip on reality, or was the Clockwork Child truly warping the fabric of my existence? Desperate for answers, I returned to Mrs. Elwood. She listened intently as I recounted my experiences, her expression growing graver with each word. "You've become entangled in its world, James," she said solemnly. "The Clockwork Child exists in a realm where time doesn't flow as we understand it. It's drawn to you because of your connection to both the old and the new, the antiques you cherish and the technology you depend on." Her words were cold comfort. I knew I had to confront this entity, to break free from its temporal web. I devised a plan to trap the Clockwork Child, using the very technology it seemed to abhor. That night, I set my trap in the antique shop where the soul began. I surrounded the ancient clock with an array of modern gadgets, digital recorders, cameras, even a drone. I was ready to face the Clockwork Child, to end this nightmare once and for all. As the clock struck midnight, the air grew thick with anticipation. Then, in a whirl of gears and shadows, the Clockwork Child appeared. Time fractured around us, reality bending under the weight of its presence. The ticking of its eyes was deafening, a cacophony that threatened to shatter my mind. I activated my devices, creating a web of modernity that seemed to weaken the child. It faltered, its movements becoming erratic, as if struggling against the flow of time itself. For a moment, I believed I had the upper hand. But the Clockwork Child was not defeated so easily. It lashed out, its temporal powers disrupting my gadgets. Time stretched and compressed around us in a dizzying dance. I fought to keep my focus, to maintain my hold on the present, but the child's power was overwhelming. In the chaos of our confrontation, the Clockwork Child's true nature began to reveal itself. I saw flashes of the past, glimpses of the clockmaker's workshop, the tragic accident that claimed his son's life, the desperate creation of the Clockwork Child. I saw its loneliness, its confusion, trapped in an existence it never asked for. Empathy welled up within me, drowning out my fear. I saw the child not as a monster, but as a victim of circumstance, a prisoner of time. In a moment of madness or clarity, I couldn't tell which. I turned off my gadgets, silencing the modern world that tormented the child. For a brief moment, there was peace. The Clockwork Child looked at me, its ticking eyes slowing, and I felt a connection, a mutual understanding bridged across the chasm of time. But that moment was fleeting. Fear and confusion flickered across the child's mechanical face. It recoiled from me, its powers lashing out in a final, desperate attempt to preserve itself. Time warped violently, and I was caught in its storm. As the fabric of time twisted and contorted around me, I found myself trapped in a whirlpool of memories and moments, both mine and the Clockwork Child's. The shop faded away, replaced by a series of disjointed visions. The clockmaker's workshop, filled with the sound of ticking and the scent of polished wood. The tragic day when a young boy's laughter was silenced forever. The creation of the Clockwork Child, a desperate attempt to defy death and time. In this maelstrom of past and present, the child's essence was laid bare to me. Its existence was a tapestry of sorrow and longing, woven by a father's grief. I saw the clockmaker pouring his heart and soul into his creation, infusing it with a love that transcended the boundaries of life and death. But the result was a creature caught between worlds, never fully belonging to either. I felt the child's confusion, its loneliness, the endless cycle of its existence. It was not evil, merely lost, a prisoner of its own temporal anomaly. My heart ached for it, for the innocence it represented, and the tragedy it embodied. As these revelations unfolded, my resolve to end this cycle strengthened. I reached out to the Clockwork Child, my voice steady yet filled with empathy. "I understand your pain," I said. "You don't have to be alone in this. Let me help you find peace." For a moment, it seemed as though the child understood. The ticking of its eyes slowed, and a look of profound sadness crossed its mechanical face. But then, fear and confusion took hold once again. It recoiled from my offer, its temporal powers lashing out in a frenzy. The world around me began to unravel, time stretching and compressing with dizzying speed. I felt myself being pulled into an endless loop, the same moment repeating over and over, a moment of choice, of reaching out and being pushed away. I realized too late the consequence of my actions. In trying to connect with the Clockwork Child, I had become entangled in its temporal web. The loop was inescapable, a prison of my own making. Each cycle reinforced the next, an eternal echo of my failed attempt to free us both. As the realization dawned on me, a sense of utter despair washed over me. I was trapped, a ghost in the clockwork of time, doomed to relive my failure forever. The last thing I saw before the loop closed in on itself was the Clockwork Child, its eyes ticking away the seconds of my endless imprisonment. Here I am, caught in the ticking shadows of eternity. I narrate this tale from within the loop, a warning to those who might tread the same path. I am a specter, a remnant of a man who delved too deeply into mysteries not meant for the living. My world is now a perpetual echo of that fateful night, a fragment of time endlessly repeating. The antique shop, the confrontation, my moment of empathy all play out in an unending cycle. I am aware of each repetition. The Clockwork Child remains a mystery, a shadow at the edge of time. It is still out there, somewhere between the ticking of clock hands, a reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. As for me, I exist in a twilight of what-ifs and might-have-beens. My story is a tragic tapestry woven from curiosity and empathy, a tale with no end. I am James Carter, a prisoner of time, forever reliving the night I met the Clockwork Child. And so, I leave you with this caution. Be wary of the shadows cast by the past, for they may just ensnare you in their embrace, leaving you, like me, a whisper in the fabric of time.